invest in people in the long term, there has to be a mutual understanding.
Hustle hard, hustle hard. Closed mouths don't get fed. Thinking strategically, but acting like a gorilla is the kind of marketing that's small. When it innovates very little, it's highly risk averse. It indicates
Okay. Operations is process, it's flow, it's bringing things together. These are all good words. But if you want to just be as simple as possible with it, it's the day to day. It's how we do what we do. It's you're living in the business when you think about operations. You're thinking about the time you wake up in the morning, the time you leave, who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, and all this kind of stuff. And I would venture to say it's one of the most important things as an entrepreneur, as a project leader, as a business administrator that you do, because why do customers come to your business to buy your products or services? What are they looking for? If you were to sum up a particular word, what are they looking for when they come and buy from you? And operations is how you create the value for your customers. So here we go. Let's talk about Taco Bell. When you think about Taco Bell's operations, let's break it down as simple as possible at Taco Bell. What is the first thing that you have to get into the minds of the consumer? You have to get into the feet and the hands and the brains of a consumer. You're hungry and you're going home and you're not quite sure if there's any food in the refrigerator. Or maybe there is food in the refrigerator, but you have no desire to put it together. You decide on your way home, you see what is that? The bell. You see the bell and the lights are on and you're saying to yourself, man, I want to go there. So you decide to go into Taco Bell. What is the decision that you're going to make as the consumer as soon as you pull into that parking lot? You have an option is you can either sit in your car and order from the drive-through, or you can go inside and order inside. Okay, cool. Let me see if I can go back because I think there might be. Okay, so now you're the operator at Taco Bell, and you know that the consumer has these two options. Where do the orders come from then? Now that we know that inside or drive-through, there's 2 points that these orders can be coming from, the drive-through and inside. So now a customer goes and they place an order in 2 different locations. When they place the order, where does that order go at Taco Bell? Before the kitchen, it goes into a what? A third way nowadays where these companies can, which is very difficult for operations, believe me. We'll get to that in a second. But so you have the drive-through, you have somebody ordering like in the physical store with a person. Then you have somebody at a kiosk. And I would say a fourth way is somebody ordering through the app. So this presents some operational issues. And again, we'll talk about, but before it goes to the kitchen. So let's say they place an order from one of those 4 venues. It goes into something called a point of sale system. And in that point of sale system, it then gets triggered and it's sent in 4 different locations. So now we'll think about it for a second. Let's go to here. If we're Taco Bell and it's lunchtime, what are some things that we're considering during lunchtime of how we're prioritizing when and in which fashion we're making those foods? So you got an order coming in and the order goes to the kitchen. Which order do you think you should prioritize? The order coming from the kiosk, the iPhone, which is somebody outside the store, or the drive-through? Which should be prioritized? She prioritized the way in which those orders are being sent into the kitchen. And so that is called an operating decision. And it's an operating decision that's going to build out an operating model based on something called bottlenecks. Consistency and bottleneck. Look at these things as separate. The consistency should be over here. It should look like this. Because it's important. The slide is messed up. There we go. All right. So we made an operating decision on how to prioritize things. So if you think about it, and without asking too many questions, you might have a line or like a kitchen with a food making station for the drive-through, and you might have another area where people make the food for the kiosk and the people ordering in the store. So there might be 2 different places where people order food. So the drive-through only comes to this one making taco station, and then this other set of orders comes to this other making taco station. Again, another operating decision. So let's carry this through. Now we're thinking as operators of Taco Bell, people place the order. We now have the right, either the drive-through or the kiosk making the food. So when I'm making the food, I'm working at Taco Bell. I'm feeling pretty happy today and pretty good. So I can put like some extra meat on tacos, right? Put some give them twice the amount of meat. Am I allowed to do that? I didn't pay for it. I'm feeling really nice today as a taco maker. So I'm just going to put more meat on the tacos. Is that permissible? Operating decision, but it's about portion control. So we want to make sure that we not only have a system, an operating system where we take an order and it goes to this line or this line, but then within those lines where we're making these tacos, we have to have something called portion control. So now we're beginning to build out. Portion control is very important because it does a ton of things. It It makes it simple, makes it clean. It controls inventory and supplies, and also it makes it consistent. If you can see on the screen, when I get a taco from this Taco Bell versus this Taco Bell, it's the same amount of meat. That consistency is something that the customers want. Let's talk about consistency just for a second. If you were to go to a restaurant, we may have talked about this before, and you had an experience where the restaurant was a 10 out of 10. You went there, it was awesome. The next time you went to the restaurant, it was like an 8 out of 10. It was decent, but it wasn't as great. The next time you went to the restaurant, it was a 2 out of 10. It was horrible. You had a terrible experience. And then you went back to the restaurant, it was like a 5 out of 10. It was like, it's sort of good. Then you went back to the restaurant again, and it was an 8 out of 10. It was like really good. So imagine that restaurant and that experience versus a restaurant where every single time you went there, you got an 8 out of 10. Every time. Which restaurant would you prefer to go to? The one you get an 8 out of 10 all the time, or the one that's inconsistent? Customer experience, the consistency, not just in the tacos, but in the greeting, in the ordering process, in the time that you wait. All of this stuff, we want consistency. We want to expect something. We have something in our mind, some kind of image of how this service is being delivered. And in addition to expecting that, we want it to be delivered to us. So this is it. It's how do we define quality? What are the 4 features or benefits that we're going to rate or rank that tells us we're doing a good job? So if you were to rate the quality of this instruction tonight, how would you rate it? Don't answer that. But the point is, there needs to be an element of, okay, so here are a few options for you. Is it entertaining? That's one way to say it's of a quality. Is it informative? Is it good content? Do I seem to be using my words so that you can understand them? That's another way to rate quality of this present. Are my visuals compelling? We can go on and on with how each one of you, some of you may walk out of this meeting and say, man, I really learned a lot about operations side. Some of you may walk out of class and say, this Dr. Kershner, man, he's freaking annoying and I don't like listening to him. Why? Because all of you have a different idea of what quality is. So when we talk about operations, not only do we need to understand and address our operating model, we need to take a look at bottlenecks. Bottlenecks, by the way, at Taco Bell would be the cars backing up on the street because the drive-through is can't handle the orders. So in order to address those bottlenecks, we're setting up 2 different lines. We're going to talk about consistency. You know, how are we capable of delivering the same service or product all the time, you know, within some sort of process? Capacity we haven't gotten to yet, but we have to think about quality. How are we going to define quality in our operations? And then how are we going to measure quality? Not only do we need to define it, but we need to measure it. So very important. So that we know when we say quality, we know that our operating model not only delivers it, but also measures it. Critically important. Okay, so how about this thing called customer relationships or relationships with customers baked into our operating model? Can anybody give me an example of that? What does Chick-fil-A do within their operating model in order to build relationships with their customers? If you're training at Chick-fil-A, do you think that the trainers say, hey, we need to greet customers when they come in and we need to make sure that they have their needs taken care of? Is that specific enough? The answer is no. Here's how it works. The moment a customer walks through the door, there's a bell that rings somewhere, whatever that looks like. So we know when they enter the door. So operating decision, make sure there's an alarm. The moment that they step into the restaurant, we want to get eye contact with them. When we get eye contact with them, we want to say to them, we're happy you're here, or how can I take your order? And also one of the things they do when you say thank you at Chick-fil-A, what do they say when you say thank you? My pleasure. So again, it's good to say, hey, they do good and they do great things. But when we're thinking about operators, we have to write this stuff down. We have to define it and we have to measure it. So we say, my pleasure every time someone says thank you. Once they walk in the door, there's a trigger. There's some sort of alarm. I'm making this up, but maybe there's some sort of alarm. The lady at the front, which is like the prime lady, she might be taking an order. So there has to be 2 people at the front. Again, operating decision. One person has to be the greeter. The other person has to be the one taking the order. So we're choosing to make an operating decision in order to create the relationship with the customer so that we have somebody extra there because we believe in greeting people when they walk into the door. And that's important. By the way, Racetrack does that as well. Did somebody raise their hand? So is it fair enough, and thank you for those examples, that some of these things are written into the policies at Publix for some of the employees, the way in which we expect you to behave? Is that fair for me to say that? Okay, so that would be, again, if you take quality levels and you look at policies, you split that out. There's policies around how we act at this organization. So I'm going to give another example, but I want to nail this operating model home. This is a win, 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 win. Here's why. Number one, it's a win because it simplifies and standardizes the way in which you deliver services and products. So when it simplifies and standardizes, that you can't always standardize, by the way, but you can try to standardize as much as you can. What it does is it reduces cost. So not only does it simplify and standardize, it reduces cost. That's a win-win. Then the customer experience, they get consistency and you build a relationship. So by creating an operating model, you standardize things and simplify them for your employees, you reduce costs, your customers get consistency, and you build relationships. So think about that. And this is the power of operations. If we can try to delineate as much as possible the steps in which the customer is interacting with our business, and we can be very clear about those steps. And I'm going to give an example in a second. The better off we can be as project leaders and entrepreneurs. So I don't have a lot of time, but I want to talk about something which I expect you to do in your deliverable in your operations section. It's called mapping your processes. So I work with an entrepreneur. His name is Tondo in South Africa. And we left South Africa 1 year. And the students were able to create this relationship that Tondo had. And Tondo was a one-man show. Really, he had some day laborers. And what he did was he created this paper product by going down to the river and cutting river reed. And he would just cut this grass product essentially. And he would turn this grass, which is his supplies, into paper. And this is when people were visiting South Africa post-apartheid, and they wanted to come home with some sort of local South African whatever. So he set up these relationships with retailers where they wanted to carry his paper that was created in South Africa. Pretty cool product. And so when he set up these relationships, and we thought we did a great job as consultants by getting in these relationships, we came back the next year and he was in big trouble. He was in big trouble because he could not keep up with the capacity. His capacity was constrained. He could not keep up with his retailers. They needed more paper and he wasn't able to provide it. In addition to that, some of his retailers weren't paying him because he was too busy making the product. So he was a kind of gregarious guy that you wanted to be out, doing stuff, meeting people, but he was so bogged down in creating the paper that he missed out on sort of working on the business as opposed to in the business. So the next year we needed to do something for him, and it's called mapping his process. So here's an example. I can pull it up. And it's pretty, yours doesn't need to be this detailed, but I'm showing you this example to help you see what it looks like to create an operating process. You want to take a look at every aspect of this business. And here we have a process flow, but we have a diagram. The circle is a task. The square is an inspection or quality control moment. Remember, we talked about quality control, what's quality, and how are we measuring this? So obviously we need to inspect it. The arrow is movement, so you're moving to a different stage. The triangle is storage. And by the way, storage can be a capacity constraint. And then this little D looking thing is a delay or a bottleneck. So we really want to pay attention to those delays or bottlenecks. So let's walk through Tondo's paper making process. So first Tondo goes down to the river. He cuts the reeds at the river. Make sense? No problem. Moves reeds to studio outside. Then he shred reeds into small pieces. It doesn't have to be proper. You just write what you write. You see some process and you write it down with the shredder. Okay, cool. So now we want to cook reeds in a caustic soda for 2.5 hours outside room. Now, do you see here? This is a bottleneck. Why is there a bottleneck right there in cook reeds and in caustic soda for 2.5 hours? It could interrupt this process. It takes a long time. And likely where he cooks the reeds in a caustic soda, he may not have 15 different areas to cook. It may just be one area. So you can only put a certain amount in there at a time. So clearly a bottleneck. Okay, so then he moves the reeds inside for processing. He rinses out the caustic soda in washing machine twice, not once, but twice. He moves the pulp into drums. Remember, stage 1, stage 2. Then he bleaches pulp in the drums. Then he moves pulp into washing machine. Then he rinses bleach pulp several times. Okay, now here we go. Test alkaline level for quality. This is a what? This is a quality control check. It's so important that you bake this into a process. It's so important that you bake this into even a service. You have to have an area in which somebody takes a look at this thing and says, is it being done well? If there's no quality control check, you might just do it haphazardly, randomly. You might have one pile of paper that is really good, and you may have another pile of paper that ain't so good. So your consistency is going to be off if you don't bake in these quality control checks along your operating process. So you're mapping this thing out. So now we're moving into stage 3. Storage of size in studio, move size. He called it a studio. It's really like, shack. Move size into water. So there's a triangle here. What does a triangle mean? It means storage. So could there potentially be another bottleneck in this triangle storage that isn't indicated? And why would storage be a bottleneck? So he could very well not have enough storage. So it's not a bottleneck necessarily. It's a capacity issue. And it could lead to a bottleneck. So he can't make as much paper because he doesn't have many places to store it. So, all right, you suspend a pulp in water, tray with size and water, test pulp for correct level of size. Remember, this is a quality control check. And then if it's okay, you add more. If it's not okay, you probably do something else with it. Pour pulp into molds and transfer it onto felt sheets. Press water out of the sheets, batch for 50. Move sheets to drying racks, and then store sheets while they dry. So this could be the bottleneck for storage. Move sheets to press machine, press sheets flat, move sheets to storage boxes, finished basic product stored. So once we created this for him, the value in this, why would you, the business owners, entrepreneurs, administrators, why would you have why would you reap value from a process laid out like this? What would you do with something like this? You can plan and schedule. That's a wonderful answer. Why else? Yes. You can train employees, and why is that important? More as to you get an employee in and you train them. You're business owners, right? You're project managers. What then? Now you have trained employees. What does that help you with? Back to that win, 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 win is you have a consistent, clear process that has been now articulated. Likely with that clear articulated process, your costs come down. Remember the guy at Taco Bell that's putting on too much meat. You're saying, no, no, we have a protocol. It's called portion control. Here's how much meat you put in. You have quality control checks to make sure the taco's going out. Do not have that much meat. Okay, so now you're saving money, right? Hopefully. And then you can train other people. You can scale your business. You're developing, quality products. And hopefully at some point in time, you're building relationships with customers. So all of that can happen. And thank you, Jacqueline and Angela, and everybody who answered that, by creating this mapped out process. And one of the things that you should be thinking about too is what steps can I cut out? It seems like I've been doing this, let's say I like editing videos or whatever. And I take the video and I save it over here and I put it into this software. And after I put it in the software, I add some whatever. And I have this whole laid out process with editing my videos. And I realized that I don't have to do any of that. All I have to do, and it takes me 2.5 hours, all I have to do is send a video clip to johnnysvideoediting.com and he charges me $15 and he does that all for me. And it takes me no time. So that way I pay $15 and I outsource it and I can focus on other things. So it gives me the idea of saying, what am I spending my time on and why? So it challenges me with these questions within my operating model. What can I do better? So that's another value with that as well. Okay, so again, an operating model, an operating process, mapping out your process is very important. So let's talk about a restaurant for just a minute. And this will maybe be my last example. And I want to talk about something that I call, it's kind of weird, but it's called pregnant moments. And when you think about pregnant moments, again, we're talking about the operating model, talking about consistency, we're talking about quality, we're talking about policies and procedures, we're talking about developing relationships with customers, we're talking about how we do what we do, how we create value within our services, and how we deliver that value through our operations. Okay, cool. Now, a pregnant moment are these moments, and we've all experienced it, when we walk into receive a service or a product, and there's like an opportunity for us to evaluate whether or not this is a good service or product. And let me see if I can give you an example. Restaurant is probably the best example. Managing pregnant moments. You are going to Texas Roadhouse, and you are coming in with 5 of your family members. For anyone who was in this previous class, a lot of us value family. Okay, so we value family, we value quality time. We also value hard work, which means we've worked hard all week long and the week before. We've saved up money. We're about to spend $250 on dinner. And so when we walk into Texas Roadhouse, what do we want to see when we drive past Texas Roadhouse on the road and we're about to make a U-turn on US 1 to get back into Texas Roadhouse, but we're going north, we got to make a U-turn. When you see the sign, Texas Roadhouse sign, and it's got Texas, Texas, Texas. The T and E, the neon sign are out. They're not lit up. And you have the A, lit up. What does that tell us? So that first experience, when we take a look at that sign and we see that the sign isn't working right, what are we thinking in our mind? This is down. So it would be fair to, in addition to mapping out your internal process, it's probably a good idea as operators to map out what it seems to be the experience of the customer from the moment they drive past your establishment, from the moment they come to your website, from the moment they start experiencing, because guess what? Their eye is saying, hey, I see something that either is good or not good. Okay, cool. So now you pull into the parking lot with your family and you go to get out of your car and you open the door and there's a rat that scurries right past you and it's like right under your feet. You're like, oh, what are you now thinking about this product or service? What does the kitchen look like? If I'm about to get out of the parking lot, and I see a rat. What the heck is happening in the back kitchen? That's probably what you're thinking. So the pregnant moment starts on the street. Then it goes to the parking lot, and then you get out of the parking lot, and you go, and it's well lit, everything's good, and you walk into the door. Wow, what a pregnant moment this is going to be. You walk into the door, and what do you expect as soon as you walk into that door? So happy you're here. Thank you for taking, a half a day or a day's worth of your wages, if not 2 or 3 days worth of your wages, and bringing your entire family over here in a vehicle and pulling into our parking lot and getting dressed up and walking down this path and opening this door. And the first thing you want to see is you want somebody to say, hello, thank you for being here. I'll be right with you. Or how many people are in your party? I'm going to get you seated right away. If that doesn't happen, we got a problem. Okay, so now let's continue. One of the most miserable places to be in the entire world is the we're waiting to be seated area of a restaurant, right? These people are like sitting there like, I'm not happy about what's happening. So if we're managing these pregnant moments and we know that we're at capacity and we're designing things into our operating model to be customer oriented, what's a way that we could choose to use that moment of people waiting? And again, I take Texas Roadhouse as an example, and to utilize that time constructively so that those people are entertained. I don't think Texas Roadhouse does this anymore, but they used to. That's the Texas Roadhouse example. Maybe for some of you who have experienced that. What are some other examples that restaurants can do that if you're busy in your restaurant, you can't be seated, what should a hostess offer you? Go. Like, we don't, our table's not ready yet. It's going to be about 15 minutes, Kershner party. But we would love for you guys to go over to the bar. There's a couple of seats open. If you guys want to get some drinks at the bar, please go right ahead. We can add it to your table. We can add it to your tab at the table. Wow. Oh my gosh. What a pregnant moment where I was acknowledged, it was understood, empathetic, and I was offered to do a different option. How about these like video games for kids, all this kind of stuff? So one of the stories that I'm kind of leading to is if you see that this is an opportunity where people are evaluating it, and you can manage these pregnant moments in your operation. Um, why not turn that experience into a positive one? You think about you can have a juggler out there juggling pins and entertaining people because you have this backup and people are waiting to get in this restaurant. Or how about a storyteller, somebody that's entertaining people through stories? And when they say, "Oh, Kirshner party, your table's ready," I say, "No, no, wait a minute, I want to hear the end of the story." I'm so many establishments have done this in the past. In Disney World is infamous with this when you're waiting in the lines to get into one of the rides. It's like literally a ride in the line because they understand these pregnant moments. They entertain the kids with the Mickey Mouse and stuff while you're waiting. It's like waiting in line is fun. And so these are the things that we want to consider in our customer experience process. Okay, so now obviously we go to see it, we have a good meal, all this kind of stuff. One of the key things we have to think about in both our operating model and the customer experience is when do we collect the money? When do we get paid? So I'm going to use Daniel's group as an example with this car situation. What would be the best idea if I'm online and I call Daniel and I make a reservation for this car? When does Daniel want to get paid? Would it be fair to say if I offered you, hey, not only will I pay you up front, but I'll also give you a commission up front? Would that be helpful for you? So the answer, everybody in this class, is yes. The quicker and sooner a customer can pay you, the better it is for you. Why? Oh yeah. So all of these answers are valid. Cash flow is valid. All this kind of stuff is valid. And the reality is, we want our money as soon as possible, as quick as possible. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes that can't happen. But my point in this is to number one say, hey, if you're in business and you're designing an operating model, the sooner you can collect, the better, for multiple reasons. But the other reality is that you need to pay attention to this question, this ask: when do we get paid? We don't want to get paid when the customer has the opportunity to leave our store and they pay us when they come back for some odd reason. They come in, they buy a car, and they can pay us next week. No, we want to get paid the moment they decide that they want to drive this car off the lot. We need to be paid in full, ideally, or we need to have a loan or something like that. So my point in this, not to draw it out, is we need to have somewhere in an operating process for payment, for exchange of money, exchange of resources. So that's a critical thing. So I'm going to stop here. I want to sort of conclude by saying that the operations, as you can tell, are vitally important because they drive the value that we create for customers. The two things that I expect from you is so let me finish with the customer part of it. If you we did this before in one of my classes, is we just went ahead and say, okay, from the time you get out of your car, from the first moment you experience this restaurant, which is when you drive past it and you look at the sign, the Texas Roadhouse sign, from that point until the time you leave that restaurant and it's completely out of your sight, how many different interactions or moments should we care about within that operation? And it turned not to be 8 or 10, it turned out to be 80. And obviously that's a lot. So, I'm not expecting that of you. But what I expect of you is to lay out all of those moments. If it's 15, 20, 30, you have to lay all those moments out from the customer side of things. And in addition to laying that out from the customer side of things, I want you to map your internal processes. I want you to talk about here's where it starts. Here's where we take that order that for the luxury car online, and then it goes to our manufacturing site or our storage house, and we get the car ready for it goes into the schedule, and then after the schedule we have a dispatcher who goes and picks up the car, and then they deliver the car, and here's how the car is delivered. That's your internal operating model. And that is so very important. You lay that out in operation so you can kind of tinker it and standardize it, all the stuff we talked about. And then in addition, you have to think about it from the customer side. So if you do those two things within your operating model, I promise you'll have enough to talk about for this deliverable. And I think that's going to be the most helpful thing for the operations section. And what are we going to need to know? Well, who are we going to need to hire now that we have these two processes in place? Number one, is Tondo going to be able to create this paper for the rest of his life? Probably not. He probably has to hire some additional people. He might have to get some additional space. He might need to address his bottlenecks. So those are operating decisions. And in addition, how many people do we need to hire? What resources do we need to have? How are we going to use these resources to create value for customers? All of these things will come once you delineate these two processes, once you lay these two things out. I'm a big fan of a few things. I'm going to tell you two things. Huge fan of this. Is anything in business, we want to be able to visualize. If we can visualize it, we can understand it more. So instead of just talking about things like, oh, yeah, we need an operating process. But what I'm trying to get you to do is I'm using relevant examples to get you to visualize what it's like ordering food at Taco Bell. And when you can do that in your business, it helps everybody. That's number one. And number two is, oh, what was number two? I already forgot. Okay, here it is. It's tangibilize the intangible. And I'm going to give you a quick thing with that. So how do I tangibilize insurance? So if you think about insurance, we all might have life insurance, property insurance, whatever insurance we own. Can we feel that and own it and touch it? Not really. I mean, I just paid my condo insurance. It was like $2,000 for a condo. It was more than that, $2,300. Money's gone out of my account, and I get nothing for it. Some digital receipt that says I paid my insurance. Thank you so much. I mean, we might get something if we submit a claim, but the point is, like, it's gone. But what does a good insurance broker do? Well, they take that insurance and they put it in a folder, and they label the folder the Kershner family's home insurance coverage. And they it's trimmed in like a gold oriented folder, and it's embroidered on there, and it's put into a folder. It's there's a summary page that says congratulations, your home is protected, and it's shipped off to me in a beautiful package. And I open it up, and it's got a personal note from my insurance broker saying, Claude, I'm so happy to do business with you. I just wanted to print this out for your record. It's in this nice folder. Now I could go and put it in my storage. And he tangibilized something that was intangible. So I know that maybe if you're thinking about your business, how do you do that in your business? That's an operational decision for products and services. It's easier for products, obviously, because products are tangible. But how do you do that for services that are intangible? That's something to think about. And one last thing, I want you guys to think about two different businesses. One is you have a hair cutting business, and then the other one is you have a paint business where you have people coming in and sitting in chairs and getting a haircut. And then the paint business is you walk into a store like Sherman-Williams and you pick out different kinds of paint, right? So you have these two companies that both have customers, and one has a product, one has a service. So I want you to think about these things for a second. If an hour goes by, 1 hour, it's 3 o'clock, now it's 4 o'clock in the hair salon, and nobody came in to get a haircut in the hair salon. Is that different, or is that as much of a concern as the paint store, where nobody came into the paint store and bought any paint? Which business, the paint store or the hair cutting place, would suffer more from 1 hour's worth of people not coming in and buying stuff? That last thought you said is it. Why do they lose out in potential money? And sorry, let me look at it this way. The paint store, how come the paint store isn't damaged? If an hour goes by in the haircutting studio, that's an hour they'll never get back. That's an hour of billable time that they will never get back. If the paint store loses an hour, they still have their product. They still have their inventory. They can still move their inventory. The next hour comes by, and if 15 customers come in and buy twice as much as typical. So if you're running a business, again, operating model, that is a service-based business, and you know that you have to deliver these services in order to make a profit, make a margin, you better consider the aspect of time. You better consider it. Versus a product business, yes, time is important, but remember, you have to consider more about inventory, and do I have enough, and do I have the right colors and the right sizes and all this kind of stuff. So products operating model and the operating decisions are a bit different than service models or decisions. So again, I won't get into more detail. I could be much more specific because that's one of my fun delineations. And how you make decisions to build a service business with time in your operating model is vitally important, whereas inventory is a bit more important, and inventory management, purchasing, and what are we purchasing and how. Again, I'm repeating myself, from the paint business is more important there. So you can see the difference. And I think in this class, we have mostly service businesses. We have some products, go to the mix, but these are things to consider as you talk about your operating model. You look at, here's the goal. When you go into the world tomorrow, I want you to look at some of the companies you interact with on a regular basis. Think about the way in which they operate. What are their processes? What processes do I see? What are their employees being trained to do? What kind of consistency levels do they have? Do they have consistency levels? When the FedEx guy comes to your house and wants to deliver something, and their car is all banged up and it's chipped up and it's an old van from 1978, and the guy comes with like one of these tank top t-shirts with pit stains and goes, "Here's your package, man." What am I thinking about this? I don't want FedEx coming to my house again in my neighborhood delivering, like this. This is not a good idea, FedEx. Even though they delivered it on time, my perception of how that was delivered matters. So being trimmed up, being clean, training people on policy, understanding how we deliver packages, what the condition of our cars. A lot of these great companies, they'll policy something in that they have to wash their car every week. The part of their operating model, keep a clean car because it's what the customer can see. It's a pregnant moment. It's inspirational when you reflect on some of these leaders that one might consider to be heroes and think about their lives